You're listening to Artistic Finance, Show 102. On today's show, Nicole co-hosts with me to interview painter Bret Slater. We discuss the importance of connections and relationships in order to get your art noticed, why you, yes, you absolutely must put yourself out there, how Bret got his first art into galleries, and how he continues to show in galleries in New York and Europe, what percentage a gallery takes when an artist has a showing or sells art through that gallery, and finally, how to price art. If you are a patron, thank you. Thank you very much. Patrons pledge a monthly amount in support of our mission to help freelancers and artists with the business side of art. You, yes, you, could become a patron for as little as $3 a month. In exchange, you'll get a private podcast feed, early releases of the episodes, and bonus content. This week's bonus episode is an entire extra hour with Bret. Patrons can access that at patreon.com/artisticfinance. Fear not if you aren't ready to become a patron. I will give you those outtakes absolutely free if you email me at artisticfinancepodcast@gmail.com. We create the extra content as an incentive and a reward for patrons, but we will always provide access to the extras for those who want it but aren't quite ready to join as patrons. Now, those emails come directly to me, and I always send off the requested content as quickly as possible, no questions asked. And if you're looking for another way to support the show, we are conducting a listener survey, and that needs to be filled out by this Friday, June 10th. It would be incredibly helpful if you would take a moment and give your 2 cents on what you like and what we can fix. Wherever you listen to the show, tap read more and find that link, or you can find it at artisticfinance.com. It's 10 multiple choice questions and will absolutely take less than 2 minutes to complete. And already the feedback is helpful. We've had 2 people suggest the topic of pensions. And one of those people said, I'm sure you've covered this in a previous episode. Well, it turns out we haven't. Additionally, people want to know how to raise money for projects and how to invest in a Broadway show. So if you have anything at all that you would like to change about the show, now is your chance. So thank you in advance, and without further ado, let's get to the show.
You're listening to Artistic Finance Podcast, where your host, Ethan Steimel, interviews successful artists, leaders, and investors to help educate and inspire artists to grow their wealth.
Welcome, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Ethan Steimel, along with my co-host for today, Nicole Steimel.
Hello.
This is being recorded May 30th, 2022. Today we have painter Bret Slater on the show. And if you're a longtime listener, you'll know him as the painter who supplied us a piece of art for our 6K investing special. So Bret, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We love your work.
Oh, how we love your work. It's the best.
And your aesthetic, for whatever reason, is just something that we jive with. Oh, also, we are on video for this one. For the first time ever, we're on video. If you want to see some of Bret's work, you can also watch the video for this because it's in the background as we're moving along.
There's some things in progress.
So we own 3 pieces of your work, and we're very proud of that. Now, presumably, you know who buys your work? And I'm saying that because you don't make like a ton of art. It's plenty, but it's not like 1,000 paintings a year.
It's really recommended to every artist for sure that you keep a list and you ask constantly kind of the galleries that are dealing with your work to keep that documented so you could know who your clientele kind of is. Now that I'm in my 30s, that's something that I cared greatly about and want to know. When I began selling work in my early 20s, I was kind of just happy to do the business with the gallery. I didn't really know how important it was in a lot of senses to know who their clientele was. I kind of wish that I would have kept a more detailed register, but I did not. So there's many that I don't know.
So do you, I'm just going to say, like, is this an Excel list with the painting name, sort of like details about it, and then who purchased it, and then is that how you keep track of it?
I should.
All right, we'll check in with you in a year.
Well,
Brett, do you have an Excel spreadsheet? We'll make one for you. I love Excel. But say after, like, for instance, we bought something of yours, we'll say Hateful Grape. So how long after the fact does somebody notify you, like, hey, like, so-and-so bought Hateful Grape, and how long after the fact?
Pretty recently, from that point, I had put down, security and first and last on a place. I think that I was like, oh, like, hey, it would be great if something sold out of this small show because I could use it. And I just went by the gallery. I had seen that all 4 of the pieces hanging had sold.
Oh, amazing.
And I was like, whoa, that's awesome. But nobody ever notified me or anything like that.
And they certainly, well, I assume they had to pay you, right?
They did. And eventually, I think really soon after that, I had gotten a check in the mail. I mean, the gallerists are great people and they're super nice. I imagine they were extra busy at that time. I wouldn't have even known that they had sold until I one day got a check in the mail.
And then when they did give you the check, they didn't tell you who bought them, right?
I don't think so.
I mean, certainly we didn't think to tell you that we purchased one of your.
I didn't know till a while after that, right? I don't even remember.
Yeah, I think you found out when we had actually purchased the second one. So we're now like 3-4 years later.
And you told me.
I think you tagged them on Instagram or something.
We were moving apartments.
That's right.
Yep, we were moving apartments, and I was like, oh, we got to wrap these up. Or maybe I asked you, like, hey, how do I wrap these up for transport?
I was like, wow, you guys got those? Great. I had no idea. I remember I had no idea, though, yeah.
So this is from the buying perspective, right? So we bought a piece. They keep a list of all your pieces that they have in the gallery. So they basically send us this PDF that shows the paintings they have of yours, the price, the size, the date, stuff like that. And so we had that. And so then a couple years later, we actually knew that they had these pieces and we thought, oh, maybe these. So then we went down and they pulled them out of like the flat file and like we looked at them.
And they have clients who, since the very first showing that I've had, have consistently bought my work. And so they've got kind of like a very small oeuvre they have a small chronological kind of purchase list of my work for the past 9 years. Of course, I'm super thankful for these people. And then there's been a friend of mine who I met a show I had at that gallery when I had a 2-person show with Otis Jones there. Jan Fisher, who's been following me and my work as well, and kind of purchasing work as the years go by. Yeah, I mean, I'm super clearly thankful for people like you guys and them who keep up with me and who support the work.
I mean, we might talk about this later, but I know at one point you were saying that somebody bought a painting of yours or something for like $10,000.
There was a 5 or was it 5 or 6? I think it was a 5-work sale like recently. That was, well, not that recently. I mean, it was about a year ago now. 5 works together. That was pretty much my most financially frugal sale of all, ever.
Yeah.
Which was through my friend who's an advisor.
When you said $10,000 to me, I was like, well, that's more than all of our 3 combined.
So it was 5, and it was and the 10 was that was my half. I think the total was 20.
Oh,
Wow,
yeah, that's
okay.
even bigger.
Even better. Yeah.
This is great
cool.
for it's super great, but it's small. It's small prize for a lot of artists out there.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna get into like the pricing in a minute, but can you just really quickly give us a Reader's Digest version of you?
I'm from New York. I was born in the Bronx, and I was raised in Westchester, and I graduated from SUNY Purchase, School of Art and Design at SUNY Purchase, with a degree in painting and drawing with a BFA. So I knew I needed time. I really was enticed by the idea of, oh, well, with an MFA, you can teach college level, you can adjunct, and maybe teach a few classes, which adjuncting is tough work and it doesn't pay too much, but it gets you a foot in the door, and you can begin your tenure as a professor, I guess, so to speak, which I've never done yet. I never used my degree for that reason yet.
That sounds familiar.
Grad school pointed me towards a couple of different veins or ways to go, and one of those things was being pointed towards who would then become my mentor, kind of, Otis Jones.
Did I miss how you got to SMU?
Okay, so Len Stokes, so he knew that I was going to go to grad school right away.
Okay, so basically you got accepted to SMU, and it sounds like you were certainly drawn to the fact that they said 90% of the people are going to get a full ride.
It was almost a no-brainer. It was like, do I want to be in debt or do I want to not be in debt, kind of deal.
Yeah.
So after SMU, so you're from Westchester, went to SUNY Purchase.
Yeah, undergrad.
Right? Then went to SMU, and then you're in Brooklyn now. Did you go straight to Brooklyn after SMU?
So I stayed. So that was another vein that when I was in grad school, I learned about through my friend Asia Martin. Asia is also, like you guys, a huge supporter of my work and a collector of mine. And so she was an art history major. She got a position at the Dallas Museum of Art in exhibitions. She started talking to me about, hey, what do you want to do after grad school? Like, I was like, oh, I don't know. And she was like, have you ever thought about being a preparator? I was like, I've never heard of that. And she was like, yeah, there's like these people that like set up the exhibitions at museums. They're called preparators. She talked to Vince Jones, was her friend there, and she said, okay, Vince, I told Vince about you. I showed him your work. You know, he wanted to know a little bit about you, and he said that, yeah, he'd be okay to maybe take you on like as an intern.
Was it a paid internship?
No, unpaid.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I learned invaluable like skill just about the trade and about kind of what it necessitates, and got a really good little experience. So I had also befriended Otis Jones, and he some of the best work I'd ever seen, and it was really.
Wait, I lost you at Dallas Museum of Art.
My internship at DMA it began in January 2011, as did my studio assistant ship for Otis Jones, and that's basically what I did for a few years after grad, was be Otis's studio assistant. And this only happened because when Otis asked me to lunch.
Those lunch meetings.
It was awesome. Yeah, and it turned out to like we were just drinking coffee and talking about painting for like 5 hours till it got like dark.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
It was just such a vibe.
And he really became your mentor, and he still is kind of like that.
Yeah, because you mentioned you were showing in Zurich with him.
So in 2014, we did have 3 two-person shows together: one in Dallas, one in New York, and then one in Zurich.
And I'm assuming that Otis took the lead there and sort of got you in with him, or was it like a tag team thing where you both applied or both had the relationship?
Yeah, the Zurich and New York galleries, those were my galleries that I was represented by. And the Dallas gallery was his gallery that
you brought him in and he brought you in. Okay, so you're kind of benefiting.
That's a beautiful friendship. And
yes,
what made you return to New York after being in Dallas?
Sure.
My sister had given birth to her first child, and I really wanted to experience that and to be an uncle who was present. And I never really had that. I just wanted to and my sister and I are super tight, and I just I was like, man, this is really, as the years passed by, it was like, how long am I going to do this for? How long am I going to be?
And so you made the move back to Brooklyn. Got it.
Yeah.
Well,
that's
yeah,
cool.
I had never lived in the city before,
Mhm.
but I had always wanted to, and it was time to move to back to New York. So why not do the thing and move to Brooklyn? I mean, I had known how hard it would be and how expensive it was. And
So you moved to Brooklyn by yourself and you just did the same thing you were doing in Dallas? You did the same kind of work?
I guess you could say that.
See, that's cool because you don't accept the whole, starving artist thing. Like, you didn't go back to Borders or whatever. I respect.
Okay, I want to get to you making your own art while you're doing these other jobs, but just a couple questions that I ask everybody, and I want to ask you too. What is a piece of art that you like?
Well, that there's one thing that strongly linked Otis and I, which was before I had moved to Dallas, I had seen this show in 2008 of an older gentleman who's now recently passed away, Ron Gorchov, and Gorchov's work is often a saddle shaped canvas that he kind of has copyrighted in a sense, this specific kind of shape for. Knowing about him was one of the first things that Otis and I really connected on, because there's not too many other painters that I had talked to that had known who this painter was. And Otis had loved him since like the 70s because the guy's been around and he had a major career, and it kind of vanished and came back. And
So I just looked him up while you were talking, and I definitely see
see the
similarities between you and him.
Amazing.
Wow. Nicole hasn't really been on the show, so she's sort of new to being actually present here. So I just want to ask that same question to Nicole. Nicole,
yes.
what is a piece of art that you like?
You guys are both gonna cringe.
No.
So yeah, growing up, we're not like big art people or whatever. But my first experience going to a gallery, my parents, for my oldest cousin's wedding, they went and got a Thomas Kincaid painting, Painter of Light. And so I remember I was like 8 years old and going in my first ever art gallery. But son of a gun, like it's pretty painting, and it kind of stuck with me. So guilty pleasure, Thomas Kincaid. I like all things.
I love it. Okay. Now, Brett, your financial personality, are you good or bad with money?
terrible, horrible. Just the fact that materials and supplies cost so much. A lot of my money I would still have if I was not literally dumping it on paint medium. Medium is what I use the most of. I use a lot of matte medium, and it's super expensive. So it's a killer. But it's part of the price that you pay, right? As in a sense, like it's not like it's a surprise. That's I've known about that, and I do what I can to minimize costs. In my 20s, I did not give up, and like that really didn't set me up so great. Also, there were certain turns of events I wasn't super smart about in terms of apartment living and certain things. Ultimately, I'm always trying to get better, spend less, save more.
By the way, so everybody knows, I've been trying to get you on the podcast for 2 years. And you were one of the first people I reached out to 2 years ago. I was like, hey, would you talk? And you were just like, absolutely not. I hate money. I'm so bad with it. I have but I must say that, you live in an apartment and you have a studio in Brooklyn. You were living in Dallas for a while. You're married. So even though you say you're awful with it, you're still living your life, still living a good life.
Oh, yeah.
Amen, Ethan. Thank you. And do I care about money? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Do I think that it's everything? Of course not. But I definitely recognize more and more how important it is, right? I think ultimately this all does also comes from a place of just anti-capitalism from I still don't think capitalism is the greatest system. I think it's totally up. I mean, and but I don't necessarily have a better solution. You've got to play the game in order to live, right?
Yep.
And I mean, but if if you look at just things in terms of objects, how many things that you have or whatever. I mean, I've got more now than I ever did. I'm certainly doing better now than I ever have. But it's still always, I mean, I think that's just part of human existence, is that, the grass is always greener, or, you see this person or that person has this or that, and so they have so much and they're living so great, and look how luxurious that their life looks like through social media or whatever.
But that's social media, everyone's only putting their good stuff out there.
It makes you feel lesser than, and I think that I've been almost accustomed to feeling like that I'm really, really, really lesser than, like.
Yeah, but one of the reasons why I'm so glad to talk to you is because I try very hard on this show to talk to artists who are like mid-career and also who are like full-time artists. And when I say full-time, let's just say you don't just make paintings and sell them, make paintings and sell them. Like, as far as I know, you have, well, I'll call it a day job, but like you have a job that pays you hourly and on a W-2, and then you make the art. But to me, you're a full-time artist because, one, that's all I ever see of you. I never see you doing the other job. But like myself, as an example, people say, oh, what are you? What do you do? And I say, oh, I'm a lighting designer. Like, I also program lights. I assist other designers. I draft light plots. Sometimes I'm an electrician. Last summer, I spent the summer archiving for John Lee Beatty. So, but I always say like, oh, I'm a lighting designer. And then we also had a Broadway producer named Irene Gandy on this show. And she's produced 2 Broadway shows. She has a Tony Award, but she's also a press agent. And like, that's sort of like what got her there. And she also has a fur company. Like, she sells furs. Within like 8 years ago or something, she was a hostess down at a restaurant down in the village somewhere.
Yeah, you got to do something, right? You got to do stuff.
But what I love about you is that like you're like a real artist. Like, it's not just a hobby.
Not working at Borders.
Yeah, you're not like, this is like you live, breathe, you have like thought through all your sort of aesthetic and all this. But I want, as part of today's conversation, I want to know like what your job is that's not painting. So like what have you done, I guess, since you've lived in New York, and what are you doing now? So
I was lucky enough to have a friend who was a preparator at MoMA. Now there's a big team at MoMA, that's gotten even bigger as the museum's expanded. And my friend Mark Williams was, he was I knew him as a painter, as an artist, but he had this full-time job at MoMA as a preparator for like 25 or plus years. I moved to New York with that whole feeling of wanting to reunite with my family kind of on a more regular basis. And I made that call rather impulsively. I had nowhere near enough money to really make it work. I had kind of some, because I was able to secure a studio and sublet a place. Beyond just the trick of paying rent, there's studio rent, which was even more than my rent was. Again, like you said, it's not a hobby. It's like it's a lifestyle, and it's the times in my life where I've had to go on a very, very small amount of time without having a studio, I felt quite alien to myself. It felt very diminishing and depressing. And I've always before that, I would always say like, oh, well, people would ask me, why do I make work? Why do you make artwork? Why do you make artwork? And it was like, if I don't, then I'm going to be a wreck. Like, I'm going to be super, super depressed.
Are people asking you that because they are under the assumption like, oh, artists don't make any money? Why would you do that?
Maybe some of them.
I hate that. Stigma.
Like, but professors would ask you, to not to challenge you, but I guess a little bit to challenge you, to see like, well, why are you doing this? Why does it matter to you? Why is art important to you? Why do you want to be a part of this thing. All I know is if I don't, that's just what I want to do. If I don't make art, then I'm gonna not, and then I won't be happy. Now that was coming from somebody who hadn't yet built a career. Now, as somebody who has built a career, I do know that now, in order for me to feel good, I need to have made some type of happening or progress in the studio. I need to work to feel okay, to feel like me, to feel okay, to feel happy, I suppose.
So when you made the impulsive move from Dallas to New York,
oh man, I needed that job. I needed a job so much. Mark Williams talked to the assistant manager at MoMA, who was Sarah Wood, and was like, "This kid is a painter, and has some preparatory experience. When at MoMA, they take you on as a temp, for a freelance worker. They call you a temp. You've got to have kind of 10 years of experience in order to get hired on full time there. So I didn't have nearly 10. So I worked as a temp, though, kind of as often as they'd let me work, which was pretty much all the time.
What was that W-2? Like, did they take the taxes out?
Yeah. No, that was official. That was official work. So I did that at MoMA for 3 years, and I would keep applying for the full-time position, and they just kept they wouldn't even like talk to me in an interview. Yeah. They saw what I was capable of on the floor preparing exhibitions. I was generally an assistant to the guys who had been there for a while, but every so often, which ended up being real often, there's times where they're busy doing something, and then you got to go hang this, or you got to go do that, or you got to hang this, and I did that stuff. And there was a couple of occasions in which I felt I really proved myself.
Why did you leave there after 3 years?
It became clear, again, that it wasn't going to go much further than being a temp. The boss, the manager of the art handlers, Rob Jung, he said to me, he took me aside and was like, "Man, you don't need to only work here. You can work other places. You can also work here and work other places, but like you should just go out into the world, man. Like get your experience, go get your real life experience." And I still didn't know what that meant. I think I was still extremely scared of real life experience because I was still like in college. How do I keep this utopia going? Oh, well, grad school. Oh, and then I was taken under wing by Otis, and then the Dallas Museum of Art. It was a nurturing, they were employing me and I was doing work, but it was like they were, it was a safe space in a lot of ways until it wasn't, until it became clear, not even necessarily to me, but to those around me, that what I was doing was not right. My career was really blossoming, and I was showing in all over the world. And like,
so while you're at MoMA, you're showing all over the world.
Yeah, and I mean, not really the world. Again, I'd say like Europe. I still haven't extended to like the East. And I remember one of my first days temping at MoMA, I got an email from a guy teaching a course in Venezuela.
Wow.
And he was like, "Yo, I just want you to know that I'm teaching you about your work out here, like in this art history course." Like, oh,
wow.
Yeah, that's really
cool.
But I was like super taken aback. Like, whoa, somebody in Venezuela like even knows who I am. Like, that's crazy. Yeah. So I was like, I remember feeling like really that impacted me a lot, because it was like, even though I feel lowly on this day-to-day grind, people there were sure to put me in my place at every chance they got. I still felt a real joy that I was able to be a part of this thing where anyone even is aware that I exist, and the things that I do have some type of meaning for others in some way.
Interjecting to remind you about our listener survey. The survey will take you less than 2 minutes. It's almost entirely multiple choice, and it's entirely anonymous. The link is at the very top of the show notes. If you can pause this episode, it will just take a minute to complete. If you can't pause the episode, but you want to take the survey, please do so by Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, the link is also available at artisticfinance.com. Okay, back to the interview with Bret. Wait, so what did you do after MoMA? And what are you doing now?
2016. I kind of decided like, all right, let me see what else is out there. I got hired freelance at a gallery, Listen, Lisson, Listen Gallery, who they were opening up in Chelsea. They were in London for many, many years and then opened up in Chelsea in 2016.
You don't have to answer this, but how, like, I assume you're paid hourly, and how much is that roughly?
MoMA, again, was 13 to 16 and roughly 25 an hour. Listen, roughly the same. Where I work now, I started about the same, but I'm at 30 now, 30 an hour.
Okay. And are all these places, are you working 40 hours a week?
At least.
At least. What would be the max hours you would work?
So the small company I work for now, which is called Aston, I pulled up to 70 hours one week, but that was a crazy townhouse move out.
That we have a non-disclosure sign for.
Not.
Okay. We can't talk about
but
that.
But it
townhouse.
is crazy. Can't confirm. Crazy.
Can confirm it is crazy. Okay, so question, which is, if you got up to 70 hours, do you get time and a half or anything like that?
Yeah.
There we go.
Absolutely. I make 30, but then my overtime is 45, so it's quite good.
Okay. Cool.
We're going to get to the most exciting part, valuing art. As you kind of talked about this earlier, like just seeing like piece of art, I'm like, how do you put a price to it? Like I understand like the baseline, like the cost of the materials and the labor and all of that. So you obviously want to at least break even or make a profit on that. But like otherwise, like how do you, determine the value of art? For example, in the visits to my museums, like growing up, the St. Louis Art Museum, there is this exhibit of a garden gnome dipped in chocolate. And how is that in a museum? This is like an expensive piece of art. How?
I mean, it's all about the artist's career. It's about their origin and when they began selling their work. The price is created at a certain point. The artist's work starts as however it starts. Then their work evolves or changes, and that sounds like a conceptual work to me. I know that there's an artist, Vic Muniz, who does a lot of photography of things dipped in chocolate, and kind of like he recreated a scene of like Jackson Pollock, but like in chocolate.
And A Starry Night, but made out of chocolate.
That I get, but like a garden gnome dipped in chocolate?
So the piece Nicole is talking about, it's by a Swiss artist named Dieter Roth.
Yeah,
of course,
sure.
It was Swiss chocolate.
And it is Swiss chocolate. It was sort of a commentary on like the perishable food sort of thing. But I would argue that a Bret Slater piece of art would take much more time to make than taking a garden gnome and putting it in chocolate.
Again, it's all about like, okay, well, Dieter Roth, like, where did he come from? What's his background? Who did he learn from? What's he doing? And who's who's representing him? What has he made before? Where was that price point at? And who's to say, or how can we calculate how
do you calculate
how long it took Dieter Roth to create that, like, or what, that's like, how do we calculate, like, the amount of time it took him to become who he is and to formulate his concept? It's hard to calculate that. And it's maybe one painting of mine takes longer to make than that. Sometimes, like, the thing isn't really as important as the idea in terms of what people are buying. Some people, when they purchase works, are purchasing sometimes a certificate that it states that, but really the work itself is like a performance piece, and even like Saul LeWitt, a lot of his works are technically, I mean, you have to almost have the studio come to make the work at your house, but a lot of it is just instructions as to like how to make how to make this drawing on your wall. That's a Saul LeWitt piece. So what are you paying for? The instructions, with it being such an open-ended kind of non-definable realm? What is it that you're then buying, or what is it that's being sold? It's hard to say. It's kind of an idea. It's based upon, well, I mean, I don't know what his early works were like.
So it depends on the artist and their entire career sometimes.
Well,
Yes.
Nicole mentioned this to me, and I went to the St. Louis Art Museum.
It stuck with me, though, I will say, like, seeing that, like, years ago, like...
But I went to look up the piece, and it's actually not on display there at the moment. But when we were growing up, for 20 years, it was always on display, and we knew what gallery it was, we knew what floor, and it stuck with us because it's such a unique piece.
Very interesting.
But when Nicole mentioned it recently, I went to look up the provenance. I guess it was made and then put in a gallery in Germany, and it was there for a year. Then a New York gallery bought it for a year, and then a couple from St. Louis went to New York, purchased it, and then eventually it got to the museum because they gifted it to the museum. Because the piece is from 1969. We were both born 88, so we wouldn't have even seen it to remember it until like 98.
But it was always there.
But what I thought was interesting was that it was so easily trackable back to when it was made. It didn't go through this lineage of it was sold to a famous person or put in a like it was just gallery museum.
Well, that's the ideal. That's certainly ideal.
So then going back to evaluating art, so you're Bret Slater. You say you're mid-career, is that fair?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people don't know who I am, but so to some people, I might be emerging.
Bret, we have 100 weekly listeners, so now there's 100 people that know who you are, at least.
Exactly. No big deal.
Well, no, I watched a YouTube video in preparation for this about how to price out art. It was speaking to people who are making art and they have to sell it. One of the things is they said there's different methods. And one is you can calculate your hourly time that you put into it. That's one way. The other way is to value the goods. You know, how much did the materials cost you? Yep. And then times that by like 1 to 5, just depending on where you are. And then the person landed on what they like to do is by the inch. And so they said, what I do is if it's a 30 by 30 painting, so that's like 900 square inches, she puts a price on how much per inch, and that's how she gets to the price. If she's selling more or less, she'll adjust the price per inch. How do you determine what to sell your art for?
My determination of that, lineage of that, was it all began with my first dealer, Thomas Robertello from Chicago, who sadly stopped being a dealer. He got my name kind of big because he started showing me, and this writer at the time was, he still is around, Scott Intersect, but what he was writing for, that Modern Painters magazine that was international, and it was a bit respected for a while. Scott liked Thomas's gallery. When Thomas added me in 2010 to his like roster of artists, Scott was like, who took an interest, wrote about me and my work, and a couple of different galleries in Belgium took a real interest to me, and one gallery took the really proper, respectable route, contacting Thomas, and they said, you know, hey, like, we want to show your artist. But historically, what the right thing to do was you ask the gallerist, you get their okay, and then you give them at least 10% of sales from the first show, not out of the artist's cut. You know, they would give the artist their 50%, and then out of their 50%, give 10% to the gallery which they found you.
So he kind of guided you into this. You didn't learn about it in school?
Yeah. Like. So Thomas came to my studio. We had a long visit, which started very difficult and very cold. And then by the end of it, totally flipped and became super, super warm, positive connection. He asked me about my pricing, and I was super ignorant to it all. And I'm not really like such a super pro-capitalist like guy. The scale thing, the size thing, that was a big thing of what everybody told me is part of pricing. And I got that, but I was really interested in smaller works the same way I was interested in bigger works. So I figured everything should be a similar price, no matter what the scale is. The truth is that's just not realistic. That's very much an established thing. The price is to be determined by the scale. He kind of laughed at me when I told him what I was thinking for in terms of pricing, because I was like, no matter what the scale is, no matter what, everything is this. And he was like, no, I can't. At the time, I was like, oh, no matter what the size is or anything, everything in here I want it to be $950. because that's how much I'm looking to get. Some of the works I was making were little, like kind of 4.5, 5-inch pieces made of tape and cardboard. He was like, man, I just can't sell that for that much money. Like, that's, no one's gonna buy that. He was like, I can start selling these at like $350 for paintings on canvas that I had a few of as well that were also kind of smaller scale. He's like, well, when you get to that, and then you could start saying like $750, So we started there. I was making a lot of works with cardboard and tape and like drywall and kind of odd materials. And those were kind of like 300 to 500. The paintings on canvas were like $750, and then they would go to like $950. After we made a few sales, then we decided, okay, so, we started rolling. I kind of started veering away from the found stuff. And it wasn't just because I was making less from it. Cardboard could like start to deteriorate, and you can make a painting with traditional paint materials, and it can have all of the awesome characteristics. I was also kind of finding objects and like painting on them, and became something that I was attaching myself to like unnecessarily. It became clear, like, you can make something that is pristine and with pristine materials, but you can give it a rough vibe. And becoming friends with Otis and talking with Otis more, it was like, yeah, I can do this with painting. I'm a painter at heart, and that's where I come from, and that's my intention. And within a year or 2 years, I went pretty much from working with all found materials and lo-fi materials to making paintings.
I got it. So you're sort of making the same aesthetic, but not using perishable materials or materials that could give way.
Yeah.
And this pricing, when you were first determining this pricing, were you in Dallas? Were you working with Otis at this time?
Yeah. I had yet to start working with Otis. I began working with Otis after I had my first solo exhibition in the project space of Thomas's gallery, which was just a little back room.
And did you talk with Otis about pricing? Because presumably you guys showed in galleries together, and you both have to price your stuff.
Yeah. Oh, it was something we began to talk about 100%.
Do you guys sort of like link it together, or sort of like you saw how he did it and you said, this is how Thomas told me to do it?
He kind of talked to me about it, was kind of just open about it with me, and helped guide my understanding of it. How many years you've been doing it, and with each further advancement, like in your career, if a certain museum collects your work, then you can increase.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this was 11, 12 years ago. What was like the first time you sold a piece? What was your first sale?
My first sale was out of my studio, essentially, in college, before I had left for grad school. It was like 2009. This guy really liked these. They were larger scale paintings that I was making. It was just directly to a guy, and he wanted these 2 large paintings, and he said he'd give me $1,000 in cash for them both. And I was happy to do that, because I didn't know what I was going to even do with those large paintings. When I moved, I couldn't really take them with me.
Awesome. Okay, that's a great first sale.
Yeah.
I gotta say. So flashback 1.5 years when I approached you about the podcast, and I said, we're looking to invest $1,000 into art. And I said, could you sort of create something, or do you have something around for $1,000 that we could use for this investing thing? And you said, yeah, but I'm not really doing that anymore. And so you basically upsold me. So, by the way, everyone, Brett is a little trickster. He's like, oh, I'm not good with money. I don't know how it works. And then I'm like, $1,000. And he's like, how about 4 times that amount? No, but seriously, how do you determine price point now? And also, like, how does it work with a gallery? Because you said the gallery takes 50%.
50%?
So as soon as I started showing with Thomas, it was essentially like, whatever you want to make from this sale, you've got to double that.
That's so interesting. I work in commercial real estate, and it's the same thing in a company. The house takes half of the commission. And so it's the same formula. If you want to make a certain number, you got to double that. But obviously there are reasons that you go through a gallery, right?
Yeah, what are the pros between gallery versus selling directly?
A major pro is like recognition. That editor, he wouldn't have never seen my work if I never decided to show with Thomas.
Visibility.
And yeah, visibility for sure. No museum is gonna like take interest in your work, most likely, unless it's through a gallery, because that's where they're going. Everything, right, has a certain level of elitism to it, right?
Right, because you could put your stuff up on Etsy, or you could sell directly through your website. But I guess there's prestige and more eyes, or different eyes seeing it if you're in a gallery.
And galleries are well known too, like, oh, Bret Slater's work is in such and such gallery. That's well known, so it might open opportunities, for other galleries and other people, so I could see the world there.
Yeah, again, museums and writers, critics, people who are going to pay attention and publicize, even if what you're after is just to see what art critics have to say, let's say, about your work. They're not going to write about you like if you're not showing somewhere, because that's what they do, is like go to galleries to see what's up, and then they write about it. Like maybe it's the same thing as like not representing yourself in a court of law. Like you don't speak the lingo, you're going to have a really tough time because you don't know about this entire list of things that's available to utilize, but a lawyer would. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing or whatever, it's the truth is that if you really want, I think, right, to be represented in the best way possible, you're going to want a lawyer or an agent if you're in the film
or even this podcast we're learning. So we've had it for 2 years, but it's like you can't do everything alone. And so like we do everything. We record it, we interview, we edit it, we publish it, we run the Instagram, we run the Patreon, we run everything about it. Just this year, we are getting a podcast strategist. We're going to put a little money into getting help with the production side of it. It's not really changing anything about the show, but we're getting other people's resources and we're getting their eyes. We're getting a different audience. Yes, it's going to cost us a little bit of money, but it's the only way to grow. As an artist, you can make all the paintings you want in a studio, but you don't have time to go out and sell it.
Not if you want to devote the right time to.
Right, and it's maximizing the best use of your time is creating art.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, how does it look to, there are bigger artists out there who have decided against showing with gallery, like David Hammons, Richard Prince. Prince is represented, but he has negotiated with his gallerist Gagosian that he's also allowed to do private sale, which it's not, or it's kind of frowned upon. Like if you're doing that, because then why do you buy the gallery? Because then why do you need us if you're just selling your own stuff? But when you're at the level of Richard Prince, and you can do that because you're wanted enough and valuable enough.
He doesn't need a gallery.
I mean, he has one, but he doesn't need one necessarily, kind of anymore. But that's not that common of a thing. That's very, very rare.
When you get a gallery to represent you or show your work, what does the agreement look like that you sign? Because you mentioned that you couldn't do a private sale if you're in a gallery.
If it's in town and like it's to somebody else who's in town and they're in the same town, it's like, why are you even using us then if you're just going to be making private sales, kind of like? But it's not like you're not allowed to necessarily.
Because I remember when I reached out to you, you had a showing down in Soho or Tribeca. Anyway, we didn't go through a gallery because I reached out to you and I was like, will you do this? And you were sort of like, yeah. And you weren't like hush hush about it, but you weren't like, let's broadcast this to the world and don't let the gallery know. And now they're going to know.
Well, that's all right. I mean, I'm not 100% like pinned down anywhere right now, but I am working towards that.
So we've sort of watched your progress over the last 12 years, and we've seen you show in Chelsea, like Tribeca. You've shown in Dallas, I know Italy and Portugal, I think, and you mentioned Switzerland, Zurich. How do you, starting from nothing, how do you find a gallery? Like, how do you get a gallery to take you on?
Well, there's all different types of ways. I had the luck of being published in this thing called New American Paintings. It's like a competition that then gets published. For me, then Thomas picking me up was like led to the next thing. So it was like a very much like luck of circumstance. For other people, you can go to openings and you make yourself known to gallerists somehow. And then
So like the Switzerland one, did your connection there come from being in that magazine?
they had seen me with a Belgian dealer who found me in Modern Painters, which Scott wrote about, which is where Scott wrote about me from seeing me in Thomas's gallery.
So you got into Thomas's gallery, and then somebody put you in a magazine from there, and then another gallery reached out from the magazine. How again did you get to Thomas? Like, how did he find you?
New American Paintings I was in, Thomas found me, and then Scott, who was writing for Modern Painters, he then wrote about me from there, and then that was how I got this dealer in Brussels, and then that was how my gallery in Zurich found me, was through the gallery in Brussels.
So how did you get in that initial magazine?
It's a competition, and I just applied to it, and I got in.
Because you're saying it's all luck of the draw, but you entered a competition, things picked up from there and went from there. So that's a good start. So inviting gallerists to your studio to see your work, and then sort of try to convince them to put you into their showing?
That's kind of the classic way, yeah. Like,
it clearly worked for you because you can see the path of one to another to another.
Have you done that? Has that worked for you?
Just recently, like, I had a gallerist come through to the studio, and it was a success. We're gonna have a show. I don't know when, because it's kind of on me now to make a bunch of things.
Can we be your press agency for this show? So we're announcing on Artistic Finance,
Bret Slater has a show.
World premiere of Bret Slater's newest show.
Sometime. It'll happen sometime.
All right.
TBD.
It's going to be in New York?
Yes.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. We'll be there.
On Grand Street.
Okay, so but that's the first time that you've ever just invited a gallerist over and then gotten into a show?
Back in Dallas, I then invited a few dealers over. I had a really good connection with one of them, Marty Walker. She was ready to show me, and I was ready to show with her, and it worked out pretty nicely. So that was the first time I did that, was back in Dallas. But I had already had the I guess it gave me confidence, that I had other, and also especially that I was showing overseas, like it made me feel pretty good. Yeah. So I invited dealers, and Marty Walker was a great dealer. She stopped dealing the same year Thomas stopped dealing in 2014, which
a blow to Bret's career.
Oh, boy.
Jeez.
It was a big change, and I don't know if you'd say a setback, but I went from having 3 galleries to having 1 gallery.
It was a bummer.
It was a bummer, yeah.
And knowing the right people and relationships, I mean, no matter where you are, it's so critical.
So what I picked up from this was you entered a competition, and that helped you pick up steam and eventually get into a gallery, and then you invited gallerists over, and that helped you get into a gallery as well. And then for pricing wise, it's really the gallerists, at least at the beginning, that helped you price. Yeah, totally.
He had a great mind for this kind of a thing, and he just kind of was like, are you okay with me like setting the price? And I was like, yeah, please, like I need guidance. So he set the prices, showed me what they were. Then my second show came up, and by that time, the price had increased quite a bit. We were selling those paintings for like, $750, and then the paintings were like $1,300 by the time my first show rolled around.
Yeah, and actually, we should mention that your prices now, of course, are even more than that.
As shows succeeded, as people bought the work, it just became, okay, well, is it time to go up?
If people are buying for it, then yeah.
Yeah, and then the Dallas Museum of Art acquired a piece in 2000, I think it was 13, but it might have been 12. Whenever that happened, it was like, all right, then let's go up because of that. And then just kind of like, oh, well, then this important person or that important person has bought, you've gotten great reviews here and there, and your shows keep selling out, so we've got to go up.
So is that the gallery, when you're doing the gallery showings, are they the ones that are sort of setting the price points for you and with you?
No. At first, Thomas, my first dealer, yeah, he showed me the way in terms of my pricing. But whereas, yeah, it's been on me to make the final call, I guess. It's often been at least one of my gallerists saying, all right, we've got to raise the prices, and then I'm like, well, are you sure? Because then I don't know if like this person or that person can, I don't want to like limit myself too much. And then it's like, they got to remind me, you actually limit yourself by staying low, because then a lot of people out there, a lot of collectors like don't even want to move unless it's like a certain price. And I haven't even met those collectors yet because my stuff's probably been too low for them. But then there's been, at the same time, there's been people that come through, like this one gallery in New York I had for a little while. There was a larger piece that I had that I was pricing at 7,000. Apparently there was one guy that came through there that he wouldn't pay more than 5 for it. He was like, no, I'd buy that, but if it was 5,000, I'd buy it. We were kind of like, you don't want to go down in price just because that's what this person or that person says.
Okay, so you're sort of priced out. To me, your paintings are expensive. Like, if anybody's gonna buy one, they really have to think about it. Because even when you started like 350, that's a significant amount. It's not about the money, blah blah blah. But what's the lowest price painting you have for sale now? Like maybe something that is an older piece.
I kind of make like things in like the 8-inch range. Like that would be like, I think it's 2,500 now for one.
Okay.
Like, and things that are in more like the 10-inch range, which, because of the way that I think about it, when it gets to like that scale, I also make them a bit thicker too. And so those are more like 3,000, 3,200. Once you go to like a maybe 20-inch range, and like that can be more like 5 grand, and then things bigger than that, somewhere like 6 and 7.
So just going back, just to clarify, you didn't learn any of this in school. They don't teach you anything about how to price anything.
I think they did teach me that about the 50% thing.
Well, that is important and significant.
I'm actually glad we're talking to you about that, because I, again, was doing some research on this, and online people say, oh, it's 30 to 40% depending, or up to 50%. Mm-hmm. The reality seems like it's 50-50. Like the people that get 30, 40, people who are established.
And you can't negotiate that unless maybe you are established.
Established, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I suppose you could negotiate it depending on who you are. You could. It's just, I don't know if the gallerist would really go for it.
Right.
Yeah. So if there's anybody listening now that when they first worked with a gallery and got more than 50%, please email me at artisticfinancepodcast@gmail.com.
We want to know.
Because I don't think that happens. I think it's 50-50 for everybody.
As far as I've heard.
If it wasn't, then everyone would be going to that other gallery for, more of a cut, right? So it's got to be somewhat standardized.
Okay, so Brett, we have talked super long, and I have to cut this down to an hour. So I really wanted to talk about the Italy story because it's such a good story. All right, Brett, so I'm going to try to wrap up in 8 minutes here. I'm going to do like a fire round of just for fun questions. What is the most expensive piece of art that you have handled?
Like really recently, as in like a week and a half ago. It was right after a Basquiat on canvas sold for like 85 million. I have recently handled a Basquiat that's like 100 million or more. I don't even know if that compares to like some of the stuff that I handled in like the Picasso like sculpture retrospective at MoMA. Like there could be things that are way more valuable there. MoMA was really good at when you're working in a museum, like you just kind of are aware that it's like priceless in a sense, even though there is a price attached to it. Like the stuff is also kind of like invaluable. It's like so valuable that it's priceless, Yeah. So I helped with Monet, the water lilies, like enormous triptych that's huge. And so if scale has something to do with price, which we know that it does, who knows how much that was worth.
Right.
I also installed at MoMA Kazimir Malevik's White on White, which is just really a small painting, but that I know is in the, I don't know but I forget if it was tens of millions or how, but it's up there. And I handled like a Pollock's like Cathedral #1. That's also like super up there. Not only are you installing and handling art, but you're installing art that's priceless and historically important. And
talking about the water lilies, I know this is sort of like not everybody can afford to go to Paris and go to museums. The water lilies, there is a museum there, L'Orangerie.
Yes.
Is that right? It's 2 oval rooms that Monet designed to have water lilies, and then he put in oval water.
That was an immersive experience.
Yeah, immersive before immersive existed.
Yeah.
The museum is small, so it's, in a way, it's like there's so much to see in Paris. Why would I go to this museum with just 2 water lily rooms? Mm-hmm. But it's like, no, because the artist planned it this way. Here it is 100 years later. It's still that way. And it's simple and easy. But that's just another example of like, I prefer smaller museums or things like that, where it's like, yeah, I'm not going to see everything. I'm not going to see Egyptian art and Asian art and all this other stuff. But I'm seeing a very specific sort of lens. So I highly recommend that museum for anyone.
Thank you. No, I had no idea. I'm going to check that out if I go next time I go to Paris, for sure.
It's near the Louvre.
And it's a little overshadowed by that. but
well worth it.
But I mean, it's, again, takes half an hour. And I think they added a little wing and they added a couple other paintings just to make it worth people's while. Okay. All right. Last question for you, which is, what's your social media handle?
I have an Instagram at Bret Slater, and Bret only has 1 T in it, so BretSlater.
Pulling up his Instagram.
You have antiquated mechanism of predetermined fate right there on Instagram.
Yeah.
There she is.
I need to go like that photo.
Beauty.
That's in a super awesome private collection, I hear. Bret, well, you're going to have to come back because you have a story about being an artist in residence in Italy. It is such a good story. I think you learn as an artist things from that story, pricing and paying of rents and how galleries or how different arts organizations work.
So certainly a crazy story.
It's that's actually why I reached out to you initially for this, was for that story.
I want to hear the story.
Also, you taught me today that the artist is named Dieter Roth, not Dieter Roth. Okay, so Bret, thank you so much for we talked for 3 hours here.
Thank you guys for having me, really.
That's it for this week's episode. My takeaways are connections and relationships matter. They can direct you to the right graduate program, introduce you to a mentor, and get your art displayed in galleries. But notice, the relationships started because Bret took action. Put yourself out there. Bret participated in a competition which connected him to a gallerist, and that helped him in pricing his art and being shown in galleries. Galleries take 50% of the profits. Now, knowing that helps set expectations for when you land your first gallery show. Yes, the gallery takes 50%. That's half of the profit, but there are benefits to selling with a gallery. Those benefits include your artwork being on display, introductions to the gallerist's connections, and collaboration on pricing, plus the reality of having had a show in a gallery. Artists value their work based on the length of their career and their overall accomplishments, not the cost of the material or the hours of labor. Size plays a part. Bigger means more expensive, but there's a lot of context about a work that creates the monetary value of what someone will pay for it. Bret mentioned a painting that someone offered to buy for $5,000, though the gallery was selling it for $7,000. Bret did not lower that price, and the painting has remained unsold. Bret told us the painting later got photographed in the New York Times, and even that still didn't help it get sold. So, did you learn anything today? And has listening to Bret's story given you motivation, perhaps, to enter a competition or reach out to a gallerist? If you have any thoughts about today's discussion, email me at artisticfinancepodcast@gmail.com. That email comes directly to me, and I do read and respond to every email. Nicole and I record these episodes from our apartment, and we send them out to the world, but we don't actually know if we're having any sort of impact. So it would be fantastic if you have a minute to send us a message and let us know how we're doing. Speaking of how we're doing, have you taken the listener survey? It's the link at the very top of the show notes. Please complete it by this Friday, June 10th. That's when we're meeting our podcast strategist. We will use your surveys to structure the show moving forward. It's multiple choice and will take less than 2 minutes to complete. Thanks in advance, and you can also find that link at artisticfinance.com. Speaking of our podcast strategist, part of the discussion is how to utilize the money we receive from you, our Patreon patrons. 25% of our income goes out to other artists and arts organizations. So thank you to our patrons who are empowering us to do this. This week's bonus episode is another hour with Bret. We discuss how taxes work when selling through a gallery, how Bret's finances changed when he got married, the backstory of how Nicole and I obtained 3 Bret Slater paintings, Bret's thoughts on NFTs, his decision process for going to grad school and for working with Otis Jones, and the artists that have influenced his work. Access those outtakes at patreon.com/artisticfinance. We would absolutely love it if you chose to join us. That's it for today. Until next time, break a leg.
Thank you for listening to Artistic Finance. Make sure to subscribe. To access our show notes, transcripts, or resources, go to artisticfinance.com. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any decision, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Artistic Finance. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.